So welcome, everybody. This is our monthly meeting, Citizens Climate Lobby Houston Chapter meeting. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. And so our agenda for today, welcoming any new members that we might have. And we have our special guest speaker, Dr. Phil Sakimoto, will give his presentation in a few minutes. Then we'll go through our miscellaneous topics, status reports from our 5 levers, and then meeting wrap up if we have time for that. So as far as people, let's see, is it David? David, is this a first time joining our meeting? I don't recall seeing you before. Let's see, did David drop off? I don't see him anymore. Okay, everybody else I know, I don't think we have anybody else new. So we'll just proceed to next slide here. If anybody would like to either get that QR code we have on the screen or the web link here, let me get back into where I want to be, so that you have all the web links for our slides and so on. I'll pause here on the screen for just a minute. Okay, I'm going to move on. And Mark, would you like to do the introduction for us?
Sure. Well, welcome everybody, and especially Phil. So Phil is a director of a minor in sustainability, among other things, at University of Notre Dame. And in that endeavor, he's preparing undergraduate students from various majors for a future career with a focus on sustainability. Phil's also deeply engaged in public education about climate change. He's a member of Citizens Climate Lobby, also the Climate Reality Leadership Course, and Catholic Climate Covenant. And he recently assisted in planning and carrying out the national rollout of Laudato Si Action Platform. And that was a Catholic project. Roger Ingersoll organized a lot of that. Phil also is producing planetarium programming to bring together science and faith. And lastly, we have a special connection with Phil because he's a former Houston resident. He was National Program Manager of NASA's Space Science, Education, and Public Outreach Program. So Phil, I look forward to your talk.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And let's see. Okay, Phil, if you can go ahead and share, please.
There we go.
We
All
can
right,
see
thank
that.
you, Mark, for the introduction. But I have to make one correction. I have not lived in Houston. I've lived in the Washington, D.C. area. It's a big misnomer among many people that NASA headquarters is in Houston. It's not. Johnson Space Center is one of 10 field centers, and the headquarters is in Washington, D.C., and that's where I used to work. However, I made visits to Houston, Johnson Space Center frequently, which is why I will say I'm sorry I'm not there with you guys in person. I'm doing this virtually because I was with you in person. As Roger knows, as soon as this is over, I'm heading to Papasitos. All right. Now let's talk about working at NASA headquarters for a minute. Headquarters is like most people don't know about it. Headquarters is a place in Washington where the NASA program is planned and carried out, where the constant, shall we say, conversations with Congress and the White House go on. And it's basically the corporate headquarters for the whole NASA endeavor, and the work is carried out in field centers around the country. I bring this up because being at headquarters, you get a really different view of the science that's being done. If you're a researcher in a given area out in the field somewhere, you spend most of your time involved in small details of the particular niche in which you do your research work. At headquarters, we're looking across the scope of everything that everyone's doing and asking, what's this all adding up to? What progress do you make in answering the big questions that we want answers to? In those days, questions like, is there life anywhere else other than on Earth, and things like that. And you develop a skill for sort of reading the tea leaves, so to speak. That is, where are all these individual research projects seeming to point? What do we think the big results are going to be? What do we think are the areas that we need to emphasize in the next cycle of grants? And kind of, you want to be out in front of what's going on. And you can do that because the way that science works, right? If you're a laboratory research scientist, even if you find something wonderful in your research work, you never talk about it publicly. You publish papers on it, you get those papers peer reviewed, you wait for others in the field to try and replicate your results or debate them. And that process goes on for years or decades until finally everyone in the field has had their say and everyone agrees that, yeah, you're right. And then you can say, okay, I've got a great new result here. That works great for most things in science when it doesn't matter how long it takes to get that result. But when we're talking about things like, say, COVID or climate change, you can't wait that long. And so my approach to climate change is to say, well, let's try and stay ahead of the curve and figure out what we know, even if it's not validated to the nth degree as we usually do in science. And this is what got me interested in following climate change. This is how climate models are done, right? You take the Earth's oceans and atmosphere and land surface, you, in the computer, chop it up into little cells, as many cells as your computer will handle. You put in the basic physical processes, because if you try to put in everything, it'll take forever to compute and you're never get an answer. So you simplify and you make a basic model and you run it, you see what happens. And if it tends to replicate what's happening, act in the real Earth, you say, great, we've got some understanding what's going on. And then what you do is you go back and start to fill in more details one by one, and you run it again. And usually once you fill in those details, you get essentially the same answers, but you get them with more precision and more reliability, and you're happy. I began to notice about 10 years ago that new research in climate change was not going that way. That as details of various processes were being understood, to the point we could see what the real impact was, it always came back, the answer was, this is worse than we thought it was. And, I make a hobby of sort of monitoring, science news feeds of current research, and, paper after paper saying, actually, it's worse than we thought. And not a one that ever says, oh, actually, we were wrong. It's really better. And I thought about that for a while, and I realized, okay, so what's happening here is our Earth system has been, well, let me say it this way. Our lives on Earth, that of ourselves and every other living thing on Earth, have been optimized, right, to make use of the Earth's climate as it was before this whole climate change got into the picture. So any deviation is going to make things worse. But these deviations tend to create feedback loops that make the global warming go faster and faster. So that's what got me so concerned about what's going on Earth that I decided to drop what I've been doing in public outreach in space science and change to public outreach in climate change, because this is so important. So this is NASA's role in Earth science. Literally, my friends down the hall at headquarters, this huge fleet of satellites that are aimed at monitoring, everything you could think about of what's going on Earth that's related to the climate, and building up the database that we rely on now to tell us that, yeah, we really do understand now what's happening. So I want to focus from that vantage point on climate change impacts on Houston, and following that, some personal opinions, hopefully educated opinions on what really makes sense for federal actions on climate change and what doesn't. So I don't know what it is about Houston, but you always seem the centroid of things that happen, right? And they happen because, just for a quick review, you well know that when we burn fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, we undergo a chemical process that's called combustion, in which the hydrocarbons that fuel are mated up with oxygen. That reaction releases a lot of energy, which you see in the form of heat and the fire and so forth. And the net end result is water and carbon dioxide. All right. But when the carbon dioxide gets up in the atmosphere, it creates a blanket effect that holds in the heat and leads to what we call greenhouse warming. Carbon dioxide is not the only molecule that does that. There are others. Here are some of them. And along with showing them, I've annotated this with what we call the GWP, the global warming potential. It's a measure of relative to carbon dioxide. How effective is this thing at contributing to the warming? And so things you hear about methane, 30 times more effective than carbon dioxide at creating warming, at least 30 times more effective when measured over a 100-year period, because methane does break down. And so the length of time we're talking about matters. Water is a weak greenhouse gas, a natural one. Nitrous oxides that come from like fertilizer runoff, another, and one that's not illustrated because they're complex molecules, but these are the molecules in refrigerants, like Freon, as we used to call it, which have global warming potentials measured in thousands or tens of thousands. So things we really need to watch out for. In brief, what happens, you get these greenhouse gases in the air. Sunlight passes through, sunlight, visible light passes through the Earth's atmosphere very easily, warms the Earth. Some of that sunlight, some of the extra heat, the Earth tries to dump back into space in the form of infrared radiation, heat waves, if you will. But these greenhouse gases are the ones that are, although transparent to the incoming visible light, are opaque to the outgoing infrared light. And so they trap some of that infrared light from escaping and thus cause the Earth to get warmer. That's the global warming effect that we all know about at this point. Here's an example of it. This is an expedition to the John Muir Glacier in Alaska taken in 1880. All right, what a trip that must have been. Here is the same place from exactly the same camera angle in a photo taken in 2005. The ice is gone. Really gone. The glacier has receded way up channel. I suspect this little thing here might be what's left of that glacier. Ice is gone. So that's on the one hand evidence of the warming, but on the other hand, it's evidence of something even more disturbing that goes in the general category of Arctic amplification, which means that processes that lead to causing the Arctic regions to warm up faster than the rest of the planet. So here the problem is this. When we had all that wonderful ice here, right? The ice is basically white. It reflects sunlight back into space. When the ice is gone, you have water and dry land. This stuff reflects less sunlight, absorbs more of it. And so that causes more warming. But even more to the point, when you're in this situation, lots of ice, the bare patches here are going to be absorbing some of the sunlight, and they're going to be warming. That's going to melt the ice around them, right? Which gives you more open land or water to absorb more sunlight, which makes it warmer and melts more of the ice. So it accelerates the rate at which the ice is melting and accelerates the rate at which the ground and the ocean are warming up. That's the basic process, the basic feedback loop that causes Arctic amplification. Here's another one. This is tundra, something I understand you don't have in Texas anyplace. But this is like up in Alaska, northern Canada, Siberia, land that is or was permanently frozen. Well, it's starting to melt. And when it melts, it creates these puddles. And underneath these puddles are the vegetation that grows in tundra, which are really short little plants, like an inch or two high. And now they're undergoing anaerobic decomposition. They're rotting in the absence of oxygen. And when that happens, they produce methane. And methane, as we showed a second ago, is 30 times more powerful than carbon dioxide at causing global warming. So you get this methane coming up in the atmosphere. That's going to make the blanket effect stronger, which makes the warming go faster, which makes the tundra melt faster, which creates more melt pools, which releases more methane. And again, you see the feedback loop that's causing the trouble here. Oh my, what is this? That fellow there is doing something I don't think is too smart. He's poking at ground that's very flubby. That ground is flubby because there is a big bubble of methane just under the surface there. See, deep under the tundra, there are a lot of pockets of frozen methane. They are not melting, but sublimating, turning back into a gaseous state. And when that happens, and this is why I think the guy's really dumb to be doing that, they blow open big craters like this. So that's a crater blown open by methane bubbling up from under the tundra. You see the person there for scale. And there are thousands of these things all over Siberia. We actually don't know how many because there aren't that many people living in Siberia. So these things are found kind of at random from passing airplane pilots and people like that, but at least thousands. And that's a lot of methane being released, which causes more global warming, which causes more methane to sublimate, which this is more of it catastrophically. It's also happening under the northern oceans, big bubbles of methane coming up. And so this is telling you that the global warming is accelerating rapidly, and I think much faster than the current super validated models are telling us, because remember, it can take 5 or 10 years for those things to be validated and get into the public eye. This is a real problem. Now, this also is why you have been experiencing winters that don't belong in South Texas. You see, in normal times, we have the jet stream, which is a strong wind that blows around the northern part of the planet. The jet stream gets its energy from the fact that the poles are cold, the equator is warm. So air rushes from the warm equator to the cold pole. The Earth is spinning, which causes the wind to turn sideways. You get the jet stream. And that's great. It keeps the cold polar air up there and lets you down here bask in the normal warm weather you expect in Texas. Nowadays, however, because the pole is not as cold relative to the equator, the temperature difference is getting less here, right? So you have air flowing from the hot equator to the not so cold pole. That's less energy going in the jet stream. The jet stream is getting very weak. It's no longer able to hold a strong form like this. It looks like on this right, it takes schematically on this sort of wiggly, wavy pattern. Think of it like the difference between a fast flowing river that cuts a straight path as compared to a slow meandering river that just goes where its whims takes it. And depending on where these wiggles set up, they can allow warm air to move far north or cold air to move far south. So remember the winter of 21? I'm sure you do. This is what the jet stream looked like right then, February 17, 2021, taking a dip far south. And here's that cold polar air coming all the way down into Texas. And that's why you saw scenes like this. On the other hand, at other times, the jet stream may set up so that a northward wiggle is over you. That allows a lot of really warm tropical air to come north. And you get these ridiculous triple-digit heat waves that you're now, I don't want to say getting used to, but at least you realize are becoming quite common. And then there's Harvey. So you remember when Harvey came to visit, Harvey did what guests are not supposed to do, but hung around for many days and brought high winds and a lot of rain. Harvey was unusual. It intensified from a mere tropical depression to a Category 4 hurricane in just 2 days. kind of unheard of. And as it was coming ashore, it was the first hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico to intensify strongly in just the 12 hours where it made landfall. So, and why did it do that? It did that because as it was coming towards Houston, the sea surface was incredibly warm, 7 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than usual. If you look at the temperature scale, the temperatures are up in the like low 30s C, which would be about like 85 or more Fahrenheit, really hot sea surface. The sea surface warmth is what drives energy into the storm. That's what made it spin up. That's what made it such a strong storm. And warm air, as I think you know, holds more moisture. So there's a lot more water to dump when the storm dumped. And because of that weakened jet stream, Harvey stayed parked over you guys for days, leading to the catastrophic flooding that you experienced in your area. So these are the stats. Most of the Houston area, there's 5 days of rain, a 1 in 25,000 year event. Basically, one so rare it shouldn't have happened. And in some nearby areas, it was a 1 in 500,000 year event. Unheard of amounts of rain, which you experienced. And that's how the global warming is giving it to you. In summary, look at this. So how does the climate crisis impact hurricanes? Well, warmer oceans lead to more intense hurricanes. Yes. Hurricanes intensify much more rapidly because of that warming. The warmer holds more moisture, so you get those downpours. Oh yeah, and the storm surge is higher because the sea level was higher with the rising sea levels, and the storm gets stuck in place, and so you get all that work dumped on you. So congratulations, Houston. You get the hurricanes. If we expand our view to the globe, here's a rack up of extreme weather catastrophes driven by climate change, year by year, racked up from 1980 on the left over to 2020 on the right. The orangey things are storms, the blue are floods and mudslides, the reds are extreme temperatures, droughts, and fires. And if you look to the far right over there, you'll see that by the time we get to 2020s, we're looking at close to 1,000 extreme weather catastrophes every year. That costs us, over the last decade, $2.5 trillion. And that number is rising by at least $1 trillion per decade. Tell that to anyone who tells you we can't afford to take action against climate change, right? What we can't afford is letting this continue and get worse. The other problem you're having in Texas is this: refugees. Predictions are now that we're looking at more than 1 billion people by mid-century at risk of displacement due to ecological threat, primarily climate change, and the droughts and so forth that accompany it. So you're talking about as many as 1 billion people who may have to leave home and become migrants. This is the primary cause of all the fuss going on your southern border. It's climate change. And it's people who are desperately looking for a place they can live where they can have things like clean water or be able to grow food. So you have this immense humanitarian crisis going on that politically we don't seem to have any reasonable solution to at this moment, but that's at least the cause. So how do we respond? You know, the 3 basic things we have to do. We have to change the way we make energy, renewable energy, don't burn the fossil fuels. We have to change the way we grow food and what we eat to get rid of industrial farming practices. And we have to stop buying so much stuff, because it's the manufacturing and transfer of all that stuff that produces a lot of greenhouse gases. Okay. The number one thing we got to do is what you all know about, the carbon fee and dividend. But let me tell you why I think so. I worked in Washington for like a decade and a half. Was in a position where I could look at inventing, let's say, but coming up, responsible for national policy in the areas in which I was working with NASA. And through that time, I learned something about the way that the public responds to federal mandates. If you tell them you must do this or that, they, by and large, won't do it. They will spend most of your time looking for loopholes to get around what you said they had to do, because the American public does not like being told what they have to do. On the other hand, if you give them a goal that most of them can agree with, like, hey, let's reduce greenhouse gases. You give them an incentive like money in your pocket, like that wonderful dividend, and you tell them, we're not telling you have to do anything, but here's the new policy we're implementing. And oh, by the way, the more that you do to reduce the use of things that have a greenhouse gas content, the less stuff you buy is going to cost you. And you still get the dividend. So it's to your own benefit economically to do the right thing, but you can figure out what you want to do for yourself. You know, we don't tell you, you got to buy an EV or you got to put solar panels, or you figure it out. And let everyone decide on their own what they want to do. Sure, put out things that give them hints of things they could do, but let them decide. If you do this, people are going to want to go along with you. And that to me is the primary reason why I think this fee and dividend is such a brilliant and wonderful idea. Of course, you couple that the fact that it costs the government essentially nothing, right? I mean, just some administrative costs, and it's a wonderful deal. And I think more than anything else, we need to implement this, because it gets everybody, consumers and producers alike, wanting to move in the right direction, right? And if on top of that, you can do policies that make, you know, rebates on electric cars or whatever, that's great. But to tell you the truth, a person who doesn't want to buy an electric car is not going to buy it just because there's a big rebate. They're not going to buy it, right? But if the price of gasoline is getting up to $5 and $10 a gallon, all of a sudden they're going to love EVs. Huh? So this is the way to make it work. All right, enough of that. You know that. People say natural gas is the solution. It's not the solution. Natural gas is not the wonderful clean bridge fuel everyone talks about. Yes, it burns cleanly in the sense that it creates less carbon dioxide from combustion than does coal or oil. But natural gas is mostly methane. If it leaks, you're putting pure methane into the air. And that means if it leaks by only about 5% of the amount that's used, it's actually worse than coal as a fuel. And we have known for years that there's a lot of leaks, but we didn't know until very recently just how bad it was when in 2020, ESA, the European Space Agency, put up a satellite, a Sentinel satellite, for the very first monitoring from orbit methane emissions. So all those orange dots and blue dots are places where they spotted methane emissions coming out of the ground. And look where they are. Wow. Along the Caspian Sea's oil fields and the Middle Eastern oil fields and the southern US oil fields. So now we have a map like this that shows you for the US where the methane emissions are coming from, right? Red means more, blue means less. And notice where the red spots are. There's some here in Central California Valley. And there's a big red glob right here. And you know what that is? It's the Permian Basin, right? So that's where the methane leakages are coming from. It's coming from drilling the oil and natural gas in West Texas. So that's something we really have to do something about, right? Stop touting natural gas and take strict measures to stop these methane emissions. And I was so pleased just a few weeks ago to get this in my email. This was a request for, quote, public comment. Of course, they only mail these things to researchers in the field. So they really want expert public input on a plan to build a total US integrated monitoring system on greenhouse gases. Let's get a handle on total what we have for greenhouse gases, not just the stuff we know about, but those oil drilling emissions, emissions from industrial farming, everything else. So we really know where the problems are. And if we could do that, I'm willing to bet that everyone's going to suddenly realize that this problem is way worse than we think it is now. And this bring carbon dioxide emissions to zero by 2050 is hogwash. We got to do a lot quicker than that. So I'm glad to see this coming. All right, you know that we have to switch to solar panels and wind turbines and hydroelectric. That's these are Notre Dame's own things. This is a wind farm we put together in collaboration with a local utility. We have a hydroelectric dam buried underground right here now that's working. These are new generation nuclear stuff. I'm gonna come back to that in a minute. So you know we have to do all that. But what's not talked about nearly enough is the grid. This is the problem, that our electric grid, the big power lines and move electricity from here to there, is not robust enough to handle the input from all these renewable energy sources. There are right now lots of plans for big wind farms and solar farms that are being denied because the local electric grid where they want to build can't handle the input. That's a crime. That's an absolute crime. So, and the other thing that has to happen is the grid has to be modernized with computer controls, smart controls, so that it can move the electricity from wherever the solar panels and wind turbines are to where it's needed. And can do that instantaneously. And our grid right now is old technology that can't handle that. So we really need to modernize and rebuild the grid. And the problem is you can't do that because nobody owns the grid, right? Each section is owned by a local utility or consortium of utilities, and they're interconnected, yeah, by agreement, but the federal government does not have jurisdiction over the whole thing. So I'm thinking to myself, I think many of you here are old enough to remember when the federal interstate highway system first came to be back in the 50s and the 60s. Do you remember what it was called? It's the Eisenhower Defense Highway System. So the excuse was we got to be able to evacuate our cities quickly in case the Soviets drop a nuclear bomb on us. And so they built the interstate highways. But that was federal takeover of highways, which are by and large a state by state thing. We need to do that for the grid. That's absolutely necessary if we're going to get to a renewable energy economy. Of course, we also need to encourage the invention of mass storage. In terms of batteries, we're getting there. I see so many new technologies for batteries and arrays on the horizon. I'm not worried about that. But we got to do smarter things that don't require all the semiconductors and batteries. Gravity batteries. This is really cool. You got extra electricity, use it on a crane to lift a big heavy weight up and stack it up somewhere. And then when you want electricity back, let it down. And this is a crazy spinning crane gizmo. It's like on a big screw. So when it lets the thing down, it spins. You can use that motion to generate electricity back. So you just store the electricity. And this is like a gigantic grandfather's clock. That's really what it is. So we got to do more of that. It's just a smart way to do it. You can make water batteries, water storage by pump water. You know, you got a high reservoir water and a low reservoir. So when you let the water down, it generates electricity. But when you have more electricity you need, run this thing backwards as a pump to push the water back up and store it there till you need electricity again and let it down. And you know where a great way to build things like this are? Abandoned coal mines. You already got a big hole in the ground, fill it up with water. Use that as your reservoir for water storage, pumped water. Stuff like this, it gets away from needing semiconductors to store electricity. It's just a brilliant way to go. And then these small nuclear reactors, the so-called small modular reactors that are now beginning to come on market. These things are brilliant. New technologies that are really safe compared to the old ones. They're going to be cheaper than traditional nuclear power plants because they're small. You build them in a central factory, you mass produce them to cut costs, you fuel them in the factory, you seal them up, you put them on the back of a flatbed truck or a rail car, take them wherever you want it, install it. Where it's installed, the people there never have to touch the nuclear part, just plug in the wires and use it. It's fuel with a higher fissile percent of fuel than are commonly used now, so that this thing will run for like 20 or 30 years without having to be touched. And when that time's over, the company that built it will come and take it back and give you a new one. So they deal with refueling it back to the factory. It's brilliant. I'm so mad right now because at Purdue, they're going to install one of these things. They got the beta testing for one. Notre Dame refused it. I'm so mad. I'm saying, Notre Dame, you don't want Purdue to get ahead of us on anything, do you? But they are on this one. This is really a solution. And I think it's an absolutely mandatory part of the energy mix because it gives you long-term, zero emission, day and night winter and summer electricity, which you need as a base on which to put all the other solar and wind on top of them. This is what's going to make the system work. Got to go there. People say, but it's nuclear, it's dangerous, and we can't do that. Well, look at this chart. This chart is a plot of, on the bottom axis, the amount of greenhouse emissions per unit of energy generated from various types of ways to make electricity. And you see coal is by far the worst, and oil and natural gas, biomass. But solar, wind, nuclear, hydro are all down here. Virtually none or no greenhouse gas emissions. On the vertical scale are debts per unit of electricity produced. And you see the grand winner is coal. And that's all the deaths, not only from coal mining, which is actually a small percentage, but it's all the deaths from respiratory illness caused by the emissions from the power plants that are burning coal. And these are like hundreds of thousands per year. Oil too, same thing. But then you get out here, natural gas, yeah, it burns clean, biomass, but get out here, solar, wind, nuclear, like cause no deaths. And nuclear causes essentially no deaths, because even in the famous nuclear meltdowns, nobody died, right? The safety features worked, the people were okay. Yeah, at least some contaminated ground, but it's not the horrible millions of people die thing that the popular press has you believe. So nuclear is actually the winner in terms of the smallest amount of greenhouse gas emissions and smallest deaths. So why not go nuclear? The other kind of nuclear fusion, forget about it. I'm seeing headlines every week about, oh, a great breakthrough in nuclear fusion. I go, yeah. They got the thing tonight and run for like a nanosecond, and they're all excited. That's really different from running this thing 24/7 forever. Yeah, if they could build a device that can keep a plasma at hundreds of millions of degrees temperature and hundreds of millions of atmospheric pressure, then they can run it. But building that device is going to be very complicated and very expensive and hard to mass produce. And this is a waste of money if your goal is to fight climate change. Just give it up. Sustainable aviation fuel. Great idea. This is jet fuel that's made, it's kind of like ethanol, really. You get agriculture products, or like Willie Nelson used to do, French fry oil, and put in a refinery and refine it into aviation fuel. This is the only viable solution we have right now for long distance air travel. Okay. It's not, well, in terms of carbon emissions, it's more or less neutral, because when you burn it, you do put carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But that's the same carbon dioxide that you took in when you were growing the plants that were turned into fuel. So it's basically carbon neutral. So it's okay. And it's certainly better than pulling the oil out of the ground and using it. So I think this is the idea. We have in South Bend we've had an ethanol plant out by our factory for years. It went bankrupt, and now it's got a new owner. And guess what? Our city council is giving them $16 million in tax breaks so they can rev up the ethanol plant again. What a waste of money. It happens because we have a big farm lobby in our area, and they want to grow the corn and sell the ethanol. But I would be thrilled with this if instead of making ethanol, they would make aviation fuel. Because this synthetic aviation fuel works. The major airlines have tested it. It works. I saw recently United flew a 747, one engine running on pure synthetic aviation fuel. It worked fine. And the only reason the airline's not converting is we don't have the capacity to make enough of it. But we got all these ethanol plants that could be converted, and that's where we should go here for the airplanes. For short haul flights, regional carriers, you can probably get away with battery flights. You probably get like 500 miles on an airplane that way, but nothing for long distance. Oh yeah, carbon capture. I am so mad our federal government is investing a lot of money in carbon capture. The IPCC says that half of the reduction in atmospheric carbon has to come from carbon capture, and this is pure folly. You cannot expect to filter the whole atmosphere, period. This is crazy. It's crazy. I tell my students, it's like spilling a jug of milk into a swimming pool and then being told, get every molecule of milk back. It's crazy. And capturing the carbon takes energy. You got to have energy to run the fans. You got to have energy to it's usually to cause the reaction to go, because the reason carbon dioxide is the end product, well, is burning stuff is because it's lowest energy molecule. You got to put energy into it to get it to stick to something else. And then you got to figure out what to do with all the carbon dioxide, which you don't have a solution for. So this is a total waste of money. And besides, why spend all this money in trying to take back the carbon you put in the air as opposed to spending the money on not putting more carbon dioxide up there in the first place? Let's just be sensible here. Finally, if you do want to capture carbon dioxide and sequester it, this is the way to do it by using the land. If we just take over agricultural land and stop lacing it with industrially made chemicals, fertilizers and herbicides and all that, go back to regenerative organic farming where you're storing the carbon in the land, in the roots of the plants, you know that a rich soil is black, right? That's carbon. So definitely converting all of our agricultural lands to regenerative organic farming, that will make a big difference. And that's the way to take carbon dioxide out of the air. And we got to do that. Last method that's starting to be talked about again is people trying to panic, geoengineering, all these phantom methods for putting up satellite that'll block the sunlight or using aerosols to block sunlight or don't do these things. Just please don't do these things. There's nobody inside of the community that wants you to do these things because we do not understand our climate well enough to know how to do these things in a way that we can guarantee they won't have horrible side effects. Secondly, legally, if you put up aerosols here to block the sunlight over you, you're going to change weather patterns downwind, and they might sue you. So this can cause a huge multinational crisis. And the biggest reason is this. If you try to beat down global warming by artificial means like this, you've got to keep doing them forever. Because the instant you stop, there's going to be a gigantic rebound and the temperature is going to shoot up like a rocket. So this is just folly. Politically, folks say, yeah, but there are scientists studying geoengineering. Yes, there are. Very reluctantly. Under the rationale of, okay, guys, look, one of these days, the government's going to order us to do geoengineering. So we better at least understand enough about it so we know what to say. And that's why there is research in this area being supported. It's really as a defense, not because something we think is worth doing. That's the deal. I'm done. The floor is yours, Joe.
Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. During the presentation, I put just about everybody on mute. So if anyone has a question, just take yourself off mute and please go ahead and go for it. Looks like Larry Kramer, you have your hand up. Please proceed.
Yeah, I agree with all of your things except for the carbon capture and storage. And the example you gave was direct air capture, which I think the stretch goal is to get it down to $200 per ton of CO2 captured. But there's a lot of other processes, including from ethanol plants that you can do, like the Decatur plant that captures the CO2 from the fermentation process to make ethanol and then puts it underground 100 meters from there.
Yeah, and I agree with that. In fact, at our ethanol plant in South Bend, the CO2 is being captured. And one use of it is there's a big essential hydroponic greenhouse growing lettuce that's just across the street from that plant, literally. And they are pumping some of that CO2 into the greenhouse to cause the plants to grow faster. So, that's a good use. Also there's carbon capture at the exhaust stacks of coal plants, which is being pushed now by the feds. And I mean, that's obviously going to be more effective capturing carbon dioxide at the source, but I still think it would be smarter to just not burn the coal in the first place, though.
I would agree with that, but we have the only successful major commercial scale project in the United States at the Petronova plant, which was shut down because the price of oil was not high enough.
Yeah. And I think that's really what's going to happen is that we bring on more and more renewable energy sources, then the fossil fuel industry is going to kind of start to collapse on its own accord. Coal has already done that.
Yeah,
because
coal has been going down for a long time.
Yeah, because the price of solar is coming down so fast. That's why I don't get all excited about, divestment and all that. I just say, look, just focus on building the renewable energy capacity and the fossil fuels to take care of themselves. That's the way I see it. Yeah.
Hans, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, that was a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Larry stole my first question. But my second question is, you went through quite a few technologies, pro and conning them, and that was very interesting. One technology that's seems to be getting a lot of heat recently that you did not mention was hydrogen. What is your review on using hydrogen as a fuel?
Personally, I don't think it's the smart way to go. I'm not going to deny it if people can do it, but here's why. Number one is hydrogen. Pure hydrogen is really hard to come by. All right. The traditional way you make it is you split apart water, which takes a big energy input. So of course, burning fossil fuels to split apart the water is just ridiculous. There is so-called renewable hydrogen, where you use a renewable energy source to split apart the hydrogen, like you get a big, bunch of solar panels and use that electricity to split the hydrogen. To which I say, okay, but why not just use the electricity from the solar panels directly? What are you going to do with hydrogen that you can't do with electricity? The only possible answer to that might be airplanes. Well, I said those syn fuels are better. My other issue with hydrogen is it's really hard to transport and store hydrogen. The molecules are so small that they tend to leak through any kind of seal. All right. And even if you try and case them in a pure metal tank, they eat into the metal and degrade it pretty quickly. So it's just a hard substance to work with. And so I just can't see like hydrogen fueling stations everywhere. It's just too difficult. And, especially since like for cars, we already have the infrastructure for electricity, go with it. So I don't see the point of it, is my opinion on hydrogen.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll go to Judith next, and then after Judith, Jim and Wakar.
I was just wondering what your students are doing that you're excited about. What's coming out?
My students are wonderful. And my point in the minor is I want to convert them from being students who are all worried and excited about stopping climate change and want to run out and wait protest signs to students who will learn how to use their knowledge and skills to make a big difference. So they all come with different majors. From every college and school on campus, they come and they do amazing things. So for instance, Savannah this year, an architecture student from New Mexico said, hey, those adobe walls that my father and grandfather built by hand, they keep our houses cool. Why can't we use that in modern buildings? She actually imported adobe from New Mexico to our architecture building on campus, built a small wall and measured its insulating properties compared to modern buildings as a way of demonstrating that this would be a really great way to go for future buildings. Christina, a psychology major and also film, television, and theater major, who's a very talented writer and artist, wrote a children's book called My Friend the Lake, based on her growing up on the shores of Lake Erie. And it's a book that introduces young kids to the lake and how the water of the lake helps us and what's happening in the lake and how she's becoming sick from algae and how it's the runoff from the farms that's causing that. Now we have to stop it. And it's just a beautiful book. She has self-published a few volumes. I'm going to try and help her get this in a bigger circulation. I have business students who are looking at like accounting students who are suddenly realizing, oh, accounting doesn't just mean doing income tax returns. I can do carbon accounting. As we enter in an era where more and more businesses are following ESG criteria, environmental, social, and governance criteria, they need someone to understand how to rack up those numbers for their company. And it's accountants, new young generation accountants who are learning how to do that. And we now have several people in our accounting faculty who are teaching students how to do that. They're going to go out and change the way companies do business. So it's a little bit of everything. I could go on, but let's stop. That's enough. You get the idea.
Let's go to Jim.
Yes, thanks for your well-illustrated presentation. A question and a couple of comments. Your methane maps, which I'm guessing, I don't know if you said it or not, those are satellite maps?
Yes, satellite maps, yes.
Okay. Do you know, at least in the current and upcoming satellites, what the ground resolution, spatial and sensitivity are headed towards?
I don't know the numbers on that, But I have seen that Sentinel satellite, I didn't show the picture, but is actually able to show like a single plume of methane coming out from a particular drilling site. So it has enough resolution to isolate it to particular drill sites.
Okay,
It's
so
amazing and
it-
wonderful. Yeah.
at least a few 100-meter pixel
Yeah.
size or something like.
I
A
guess,
couple of comments. One, I think it as you pointed out, we're going to have a portfolio of solutions to look at this. And one, I've seen numbers anywhere from 3 to 6% of the atmospheric carbon contribution is from marine fleet, and they burn really nasty bottom of the refinery stuff.
Yeah.
And we know how to push boats around. We've done that for decades, nuclear fueled, and we could probably police the fuel, to avoid misuse of the radways pretty easily. So that seems like a sector that that could really make some headway.
Yeah.
And as well, the built environment on the recent Houston Climate Action Plan, the carbon contribution from the built environment was at 40%, which is a commonly used number, at least around the US.
Yeah.
And this past week, there was a special session at the Houston Greentown Labs on various approaches for looking at some of the components around the built environment, which is obviously slow to change because of the slow replacement rate, but a significant one. So there's some interesting things going on around the edges that might become mainstream in those areas. Thanks.
Yeah, and that's why I love the fee and dividend. Because saying, okay, you go off and work on better ways to power ships, and you go off and work on better ways of building, and everyone go off and work on their own sector, what they want to work on, and everyone wins. And that's really what I want.
We'll go to Waqar now, and then we'll go to Haley had a question in the chat that we'll get to.
Thanks. Phil, really good presentation. Really appreciate it. Thank you for that. The question that I have, and I guess it's kind of a comment, and like your thoughts on it. Some time ago, like maybe 20 years ago or so, there was a lot of concern about catastrophic feedback loops, and the IPCC talked about it, and they had very wide sort of ranges of what might happen in the future at that time, and then narrowed those ranges, and really, at least my understanding pretty much said, well, these really catastrophic events like sudden huge methane releases from the tundra are very unlikely to happen. And I hear a lot of pushback from people that want to really minimize climate change, saying, look, there was all this concern, overhyped, it's not as big a deal. But now, I'm beginning to hear more and more along the lines of your talk that indeed there are feedback loops that are worse than we think, but it's a very confused message to the average person, okay? Because there were big feedback loops, now maybe there's small feedback loops. What's really going on? And I follow this closely relative to most people. So I think it really needs to be very clarified for the average person as to what is going on.
Well, here's the problem with that. It's that when you're trying to make a scientific prediction of a catastrophic event, it's almost impossible to do, right? Because understand that when the climate models tell you they won't by such and such a year, the warming will be so much, that's not like a direct prediction from a model. You have to run models over and over again with different input parameters and see what you get and sort of take an average. So in terms of the average of what's happening, we got a pretty good handle of that. But a catastrophic event, you can't predict by looking at averages. And that's the real problem. We're having that problem right now with the flood models, right? These catastrophic 1,000-year, 10,000-year floods. I have a close colleague at Notre Dame who really does this for a living, and he's trying to figure out a way that mathematically we can take into account these, unusual catastrophic events and how can we predict their incidence in the future. But that doesn't come out of normal statistics. So I don't think we have a way to do that. And I think that's the problem with predicting catastrophic events, that if you ask a research scientist, what's the odds? They'll tell you, well, the odds are small because on average, it's not going to happen, right? And because as a scientist, you can only state public a prediction which you have good calculated evidence that is really going to happen. On the other hand, in my mind, I see a climate system that is really moving away from equilibrium, moving away faster and faster. A lot of things going on that we don't know about and have not predicted have come to fore. So I think we really don't know. We honestly don't know. And to me, that's the right answer. We're setting up conditions that catastrophic things could happen. We have no way of predicting if or when they would.
No, thanks. That's a good way to frame it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the question that Haley had in the chat. I'm going to read it out, and then maybe one more question, and then we'll wrap this up and we'll continue with our agenda. So Haley had a question. She said about the grid. If the grid is individually owned in sections, how do we petition for updating the infrastructure, or who do we contact for change? Is it at the state level?
Good question. First, I have to make a comment. The state of Texas has a big problem. One reason you've had power failures, like when the winter freezes, is because the state of Texas is elected not to interconnect with the grids in adjoining states. So if your power goes out in Texas, you can't bring in extra electricity from somewhere else and you're stuck. That's a state decision. I think that the federal government has to take an action that it has not taken previously on this. And I'm not an expert on how this would work, but I'm thinking of ways that the federal government has, like I said, taken over the highway system, has imposed strict regulations on like telephones. You remember when telephones were regulated by the federal government, right? Airplanes were once, air travel once regulated by the federal government. That sort of a federal takeover and imposition has to happen. I know that will be politically very unpopular among a lot of people, but I don't see any other way that we get a handle on the overall grid.
Any other last minute questions? One more question, anybody?
Great presentation.
Very, very good.
Yeah.
While we have everybody, we always like to take a group photo before everybody leaves. And if we could all turn on our cameras, if we have a camera, that'd be great. I'll wait here a minute so everybody can get their camera turned on. A few more folks, you want to turn it on for us? Okay. Here comes another one. All right, so I'll just do a countdown here. 3, 2, 1. And let me check to make sure it came out okay. Looks perfect. Thank you, everybody. And Dr. Sakimoto, feel free to stay on. We're going to continue with our presentation. I'm going to share again.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to thank you all for your attention and go on my way. Especially
Thank you so much.
Especially
Thank you.
since I would invite you all to join me at Papacito's, but that's not going to work. Thanks in the morning. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Can everybody see my screen? I'm sharing again, I think.
I can see it.
Okay. This is the section where we normally do our monthly calling campaign, and we normally do it during our meeting, but we're going to make a slight change here. And we've included all of the phone numbers. And instead of doing it during the call, we're going to ask everybody to do this after the call, whenever it's convenient for everybody to do that. And it is really important. We want everybody to call, but we're not going to take time during the meeting today to do that. Moving on to the next slide, we're into our miscellaneous topics section. I always like to announce the CCL National Monthly Speaker, who always follows immediately after the end of our meeting. So that would occur at noon Central Time today. And for today's national speaker, they're having Dr. Adam Simon, who's a professor of Earth and Environmental Sciences at the University of Michigan. And he has a very interesting topic here. Here in quotes, you can see the transition away from fossil fuels and toward clean energy will require massive amounts of metals that go into the production of electric vehicles, batteries, induction stoves, wind turbines, and solar panels. Do enough of these metals exist to get the job done? Where can they be found, and can they be extracted in a sustainable manner that doesn't lay waste to our environment? So sounds like a very, very interesting topic. If anyone has an interest in that, and the link to join that is there at the bottom at cclusa.org/meeting immediately after the end of this meeting. Another reminder that for our lobbying activities, we're always looking for additional volunteers to join the lobbying teams if you're not already a member of a lobby team. We have vacancies in our Houston metro area districts here, Texas 09, 22, and 29. If anybody's interested, please get a hold of Judith Hyatt. Her email is there, or you can put a message into the chat and with your phone number, your email address and name, and she can follow up with you. Kudos to our team that participated in our tabling event last month at the Earth Day event downtown at Discovery Green. There's a wonderful photo there that we captured with Jim Tucker, who's on our call today, and Andrew Slaughter. And the person behind on the right, I'm not sure who that was, but one of our other volunteers. And so we ended up talking with over 100 folks about our climate change information, best solutions, and of course about carbon dividends. So thank you for everybody that participated in that. And here we have an upcoming event. This is a CCL En-ROADS Action Party on May 31st at 6 p.m. Central. There's a link there for registration. And Helly, I know that you're on the call, but I'm not sure if you're able to speak. Would you like to talk about this a little bit, if you're able to? Okay, Helly may not be able to. She was in the auto shop with her car. But definitely check this out. There's a lot of additional information on that web link there. And that should be a fun thing. And of course, we have our National Lobby Day event coming up in Washington, D.C., June 10th through 13th. If you still have an interest in attending, the registration link is there. I know that we already have a few folks from our Houston chapter that are planning to attend. Here's another really interesting item. I had included this in our May newsletter that went out this week. We have Tom Lane in the picture there. He was riding 3,000 miles on his bicycle for climate change. And so as part of this, we're asking folks to make a donation if you're able to our CCL Third Coast region to support our climate advocacy activities. And there's a link there to read more and to donate if you are able to. And we're now up to our section where we normally go through our 5-lever status reports, starting with Judith. Judith,
yes, we have 2 people each from Texas 02, 07, and 18 that are planning to go to Washington, and 1 person from 38. There's 2 of those people that I don't know at all, and I don't see them on the call today. Does anybody know Lulu DeBoer or Norman Witten?
yes, I do know Norm.
Okay, he's in Wesley Hunt's district, and he is going for Texas 38.
Wonderful.
Anybody who's not going and is willing to help organize an online meeting or attend an online meeting for another representative. We have 5 districts that we have no representatives for in DC. So I think the goal for June is to get a meeting organized for each of these other districts, 9, 10, 14, 22, and 29. So if anybody's interested in organizing one of those meetings or is willing to attend 1 or 2 of them, let me know. I think that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Judith.
Judith, just FYI too, we also have a face-to-face meeting set up with John Cornyn's office in Washington during the conference.
Okay, that's
Wonderful.
great.
And another comment is that Texas 08 is off this map, but that's part of Woodlands North chapter. And I think Bob's on, but I'm not sure whether we have someone going or not. But Texas 08 would be nice if you could add that in the future. That's
And
part
there
of
are
it.
definitely a couple of 08 people going.
Yeah, I
to
think
the
Bob is.
conference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a list of that, and since that one wasn't on my radar, I didn't add it to this list.
Yeah, we have, I'm not going in June, but we do have a meeting time scheduled with Morgan Luttrell.
Okay.
So Judith, would it be okay to circulate the names of the people that are going? So we know who they are, or at least to all of us who are going, or something like that?
I will ask Susan if it's okay to do that. I mean, I can tell you the names right here that I have. For O2, I have, which is Crenshaw, I have Kathy Bray and Larry Kramer. For Sheila Jackson Lee, 18, Lulu DeBoer and Jenny McDavid. 07, Lizzie Fletcher, Wakar Qureshi, and John Glover, and Wesley Hunt. For I have Norman Witten, and I can probably find the 08 people fairly quickly. I'll do that and report.
I'm attending as well. I don't know why you don't have my name, but I signed up a while ago.
And Susan Adams the other day still didn't have you shown up as being registered.
I registered. I did. Well, okay, maybe something didn't go through then.
Yeah, you might check with her to find out if it's
okay.
Hey, Hans, what district are you? Hans, what district are you?
O2.
O2. Okay.
He's the liaison for O2.
Well, no, not anymore. I'm the liaison for Cornyn now. Roger's liaison for O2.
Yeah. I won't be going, unfortunately.
No, thanks, Judith. That's good to know. So we kind of know who to look out for when we're there.
Okay.
Yeah.
If Susan says it's okay, I will distribute to the people that are going the list of people that are going.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
We have a good group, and one thing I want to mention, we're going to further down in the slide deck, we're going to get to a slide where we're planning a social hour as kind of as a send off to all the folks that are going. So that should be a really fun event. We'll get to that in the next slides coming down. Thank you, Judith. I'm going to continue on here. Okay, for Grass Tops, Court. You might be on mute, Court, if you're able to talk.
Hey, good morning. So we are hopefully going to make some good headway with our academic outreach. We have 2 local academics here in the greater Houston area, and I'll have to communicate back with Joe so we can determine our next steps forward, as there hasn't been a complete commitment from these 2 academics, but we're still poised and ready to make endorsement statement deployed, so to speak, and then followed up with an op-ed. So it's essentially just trying to find academic support as we send off scripted emails that are personalized but scripted to other academics across the state. And then something that Joe has brought up in a couple of our leaders committee meetings is electric buses. And I think over the summer, this might be an appropriate time to do more research for that as it relates to Greater Houston and different ISDs, since it's summertime. And so I think that might be an interesting summer endeavor. If there's any input or suggestions for Grass Tops outreach based off of what us here in our chapter, like different pulses y'all guys are sensing, I'd be very interested to hear from what you feel might be appropriate venues to go down. And then I do also want to loop back with the CCL volunteer who organized the statewide conference, and maybe understand how grass tops can take from that momentum into the summer. And that's my grass tops
Yep.
recap.
Hey, Corden, our statewide coordinator is Larry Howe, and I think he's still on the call with us now. Larry, I'm not sure if he's still out there.
Yeah, no, great. I'll drop my email in the chat and we can connect. I'll also put the Texas State Action Team community group, CCL community, and that's where we're trying to get a lot of our action alerts. And then we'll also that's for during the legislative session, and then we'll have some strategy sessions for what we do outside of the sessions, and obviously grass tops. I mean, that's the whole reason to talk to our legislature is for grass tops influences.
Great. Thank you, Larry.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corden. Anything else?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go on to the next slide for Mark and our grassroots team.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Let's see, just a brief comment on the Earth Day celebration. So I appreciate that I had a lot of support. We had 2 shifts. We had 3 people manning each of the shifts. So yeah, that felt good. You didn't have to burden yourself out being the only one intercepting people as they walk by. So we had 10 people sign up to join CCL on paper, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we did have a lot of QR codes that people took pictures of, and it told them how to join Citizens Climate Lobby. And then our volunteers were intercepting people as they walked by and telling them about the benefits of carbon fee and dividends. So yeah, a lot of people were informed and educated. I gave a presentation recently. I guess the reason I put this down, just to remind people that if you think about your own community of groups or group that you belong to, consider what you can do to educate members of those groups. So this Toastmasters group that I gave the presentation to, I've been a member for a long time, and I've given about 4 or 5 talks on climate change and carbon fee and dividends. So I gave a little bit different twist, talking about disadvantaged communities and how they're going to transition. I think the last thing I'll say is my committee and I are going to see if we can help Judith with filling those congressional districts that need a lobby team. So we're planning to meet later today and discuss how we can reach out to our CCL members and see if we can generate some enthusiasm about forming teams in about 3 or 4 districts. That's it.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark. I'm going to go on. And
Just on while you're doing that, I would ask Roger Ingersoll should give a plug for 2 successful activities in the Woodlands area. We had the Woodlands Grain, we've the Grogan's Mill Farmers Market, and a very clever. Well, go ahead, Roger. You were there, or you know about it.
I wasn't there, but
Oh, okay.
I know Barry was, but yeah, last week we have, I guess every quarter we go to Grogan's Mill Market, and Charlie Lindahl did the kind of the peanuts the doctor is in for a nickel, and that generated some attention. And they signed up about 8 or 10 people. How many people did you all sign up?
Around 10.
Like 7.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of our best things, and Barry and Roseanne have been doing a number of, and Dan as well. They've been going around.
Yeah, we went to the Feather Fest.
Yeah, and it's quite they've been quite successful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know what you're thinking about the other one, Bob, but I guess cocktails and conversations.
Dr. Berry is going to give a presentation to the
Oh, yeah.
Woodlands Green and talk about the new CCL. So that comes up in May. So just the Woodlands area is still quite active.
I'd say we need to do a better job of getting information to Joe, so to include a few slides. So that's we'll try to do that in the future.
Yeah, that's an open invitation to add any info you have into our meetings slide deck as well as in our newsletter. And I'm glad you mentioned about the Galveston event that you had there. We had quite a few comments here in the Houston chapter about that. We received a ton of new members joining from the Galveston event because they added that into their comments. I believe the number was somewhere about 15 or 20 people that just joined in the last week or two that mentioned the Galveston event. So that was awesome.
Yeah, we had about 50 people that signed up from all over the world, I could say. We had some from Canada. Does that make it the world? And that were participating in Featherfest, and this tabling just dovetailed right in with their missions and thinking. And so we had a very harmonious group. And our table was always busy. So Dan went down there. He was able to go down there. Barry and I tabled. We had a couple of people that I was hoping would be on this call. I keep pulling them in, Marty Mitchell and Donna Brown, who were also tablers at Featherfest. So it was a fun event and a lot of positive input.
Awesome. Thank you for getting that coordinated. Really appreciate it.
And a plug for Roseanne, if you're like going to the Pickle Fest and need a drawing visual of a great pickle, she's the one to do it for you. She helps out at every one of these. It's fantastic.
Yes, drawing, especially drawing, except when Charlie was behind doing peanuts. That worked out very nicely. So we have a lot of fun up here. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Talking about the media team and talking about all these other locations, up in Kingwood and in Galveston. I always list here the newsletters that we've recently sent out. There's the link for our April newsletter from last month and the link for our May newsletter we just sent out earlier this week on Monday. And I just wanted to mention all of these, local remote areas like Galveston, Kingwood, now the Woodlands, Katy, Pearland, League City, Sugarland. They're all included in our distribution from the Houston metro area. For those that are on our membership roster, we do a consolidated kind of grouping and send it out to all of those folks. So it's really kind of awesome that we have all those folks. So if anyone is interested in joining the media team, you can contact me. You can see there on social media, that's our handle. And I just wanted to mention something interesting. We've always been very, very active on Twitter, as well as on Facebook. And now everyone has seen in the news all of the commotion and whatnot going on with Twitter. I've now also created an account on Mastodon, which is new for me. And we're now posting on Mastodon, which is actually very interesting. It's a nice place to be. And here I always like to include some samples of what we've been putting out on our feed. And just so everybody is aware of what's going on. And hopefully everybody will become engaged with our social media. This one on the left, this highlights what happened with our most recent Texas State Lobby Day in Austin. Just awesome information there that was provided by Larry Howe. And so I put that on our social media. Then on the right there, this is an interesting article about the impacts to all of the different states from climate change and whatnot. Let's see, I'm not sure if you can see the top. It may be blocked by these things at the top here. I'll move that out of the way. Texas is currently winning the race and accumulating the largest amount of billion-dollar disasters from climate change and extreme weather caused by fossil fuel pollution. And these are the latest, metrics from NOAA. And in our previous presentation we just had, he referred to this, all of the billion-dollar disasters. And so Texas is actually at the top of the list according to the information from NOAA. So I thought that was extremely interesting, and that was one of our posts that went out. On the left, I always like to include these editorial comics that are always really interesting. This one was called Then and Now. So in the then, you can see there, it's not the heat, it's the humidity, right? But the now is, it's not the heat, it's the wildfires, hurricanes, polar vortexes, cyclones, floods, and on, right? I thought that was amusing and interesting. So I always put those out on social media when I see really good editorial comics about that. On the right there, this was an article, as California's drought improves, Texas is drying out. You know, we've had severe drought over the past few years, and it doesn't seem to be improving. More info on the left. In our Texas state legislature, bills aimed at adding more natural gas power to our Texas grid clear Senate. This is a really serious issue. With everything else now, they're trying to block additional growth in renewable wind and solar, and that's a real issue. And then on the right, there was an interesting blog event on a journey to explore climate solutions and ways each of us can make a difference, unlocking your climate superpower. And this was a blog put out by a group called Climate Optimists. They did an interview with our CCL communication director, Flannery Winchester, and she's always wonderful when you see her in these interviews. She really did a good job on that. On the left, heat pump sales outpaced gas furnace sales in the US in 2022. So that's an interesting benchmark milestone, I think. Heat pumps now more of them being sold than gas furnaces, which is wonderful. And then on the right there, something here in Texas, standalone battery storage facility switched on in Texas. This creates additional clean, dispatchable power for a more resilient Texas grid. A couple more here on the left. This is where we are with climate change and extreme weather. The oceans just reached their hottest temperature on record. Antarctic sea ice at record low. Bad news there. And on the right, more on the grid transmission progress in the US. US continues to see the highest levels of renewable energy investment in its history. So we have the good and the bad kind of combined there. On the left, the future of low carbon transportation. Gasoline car values plummet in China, and it's the canary in the coal mine. That's because if you're not keeping up with the news, China behind Norway is one of the largest markets for new electric vehicles. They're really trying to do a good job there. And then on the right, you see Shell, more of the same from oil and gas. Incredibly disturbing docs reveal oil giant Shell knew about climate impacts even earlier. So more of the same. That's what I had on media. Dory was not able to attend today. She's out of town, but I know that she's always looking for volunteers to help email new members and encourage folks to join our Slack channel. And then on the right, this is what I was referring to earlier. On the bottom right there, mark your calendars, CCL social hour at Dory's house on Saturday, June 3rd, 4 to 6 p.m. We want to send off those going to Washington, D.C. to lobby with a free beer. So there you go. And we have the link there to the Eventbrite registration. This info was also in our most recent newsletter we sent out on Monday. So hopefully all the folks going to Washington, D.C. will join us at Dory's house. Just go ahead and register, and hopefully other folks as well. It should be a fun time.
Hey, Joe, could I ask a question?
Please.
When you send out your newsletter, like I know the leadership at our chapter, you know, Bob, myself, and others all get that letter. Does that go to the complete chapter listing?
Yes and no. So I start off with downloading, because I have access to the Texas State membership roster, and I download all of our local chapters. That's what I start from. And then to fit within our limits of what we can send out, because it costs money to send these out, then I start pruning people out. If they've never participated, they're inactive, I prune those out. Some of the members do not have valid or active email addresses. We see a lot of blank email addresses. Those all get weeded out. But after doing all that, basically it goes to everybody.
Okay.
It's not being sent only to leaders.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And so that's the end of our presentation here. Any feedback from anybody?
Hey, Joe, a question here. You had put up a code. Was that for the slides that Dr. Sakimoto had as well?
No,
Remember?
I don't have
Oh,
access to his slides. He
okay.
didn't share them.
Yeah,
The
there's some
QR
beautiful, beautiful pictures there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, the
okay.
QR code that I provided is for our
Okay,
CCL
that's what
Houston
I,
slide deck.
that's what I thought. Thank you.
So can you provide the recording of the presentation? That's one of the best presentations I've ever seen.
I always do. In every newsletter that
Okay,
goes
okay.
out, there's a section in the
All right,
newsletter
sorry.
with the previous month's info and recording. So this will show up in the next newsletter we send out.
Joe,
Yeah,
I think we should announce we're not going to have a chapter meeting next month.
it's a good idea. I was going to mention that in the next newsletter, but because we are going to Washington, D.C., there will not be an actual monthly chapter meeting from the Houston chapter. But other activities will continue. So, but we
Will
won't
you
be here
still
next
send
month.
out a newsletter, Joe?
There will still be a newsletter for June.
What's the deadline to get information to you?
It's 2 weeks prior to the second Saturday of the month.
Okay.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
And thanks for, I'm not sure how I got on the invite list, but I appreciate getting the invitations. And since I've got Roger and Joe, both of you on the call, you guys have both had some really great presenters in the last couple of months. And I was talking to Susan Adams the other day and I said, how can we get a place in community where those recordings can be available? And so if you guys don't already have a place, I might suggest the Third Coast group. I think you put the events there, but if you could update that event with just an additional note that says, here's a link to the recording here, then that way, if I hear somebody, or anybody anywhere here said, hey, I'd like to know something about this, or I'd like to hear Dr. D talk or whatever, I can quickly go to the Third Coast events page, search for that and then click on it. So Roger, I don't know how, do you know how, just the other day I saw on LinkedIn that Peter Brin had a YouTube video of the Third Coast, of the green ammonia presentation he did. But we
Yeah, what I
couldn't find, did he do that or had?
Well, actually, what I started off at, I kept forgetting to record them, but now
Okay.
I'd say the last 3 I've started recording them. And when they're really outstanding like that, and also we also had Dr. Romanek.
Yes, yeah,
that
was
I've got
good.
my own YouTube channel, so I took the recording and I made a YouTube out of it, and then sent the link, or it has a link, and I think that's what Peter used.
Yeah, so if you could add that link, and I
Right.
don't know who owns the Third Coast, but that for all of Texas, maybe Louisiana, Mississippi as well, those are really good presentations. And Joe, the ones you've had recently, and probably ones in the past, if you could add the link to the video, either on YouTube or something else, then that would be great.
Yeah,
And then I can point people on the state action team to say, go look at this event, go look at this recording. That'd be a good way to connect that together. So unless you guys have another way.
The problem is if you have a YouTube, they give you the full, which is megabytes of information. So putting it into YouTube makes it accessible to everybody.
Yes.
But it needs that extra step. And I was definitely, as I watched this, I'm going to do that for this one, because this one was outstanding, as all of his Dr. Sakimoto's are. But I'm gone for 2 weeks, so that's not going to happen for 2 weeks. But I will do that, Joe, unless someone else wants to do it. It has their own means to do that. But I use iMovie and so forth, and then I upload it into YouTube.
Yeah, and I can do that as well. I have a thing that'll do it. And
so yeah, if you want to get out there sooner, I won't be able to do it this time, but that's someone else will need to do that.
Yeah,
Larry,
so maybe,
I do have some feedback for you on that. So similar to Roger, all of these recordings that I have here, I do load them all to YouTube as well.
Okay.
However, I've only just started putting those invitations on Susan Third Coast page. So for example, if you look back, I don't have any other previous, meeting information on the Third Coast page, although I do have recordings. So just an idea, maybe you or Susan could create a separate page specifically to have a listing of the YouTube recordings.
well, and we could actually add that on the Third Coast page as a forum post or something, and then at least have a place to point people to. Because what's interesting is I said, well, I'll just join the Houston group so that I can follow along with all you're doing. But if I join the Houston group, it kicks me out of the DFW group in community.
You have to
So-
create a separate email address, add a number 2 at the end of your email address. And
Yeah, and the large majority of people aren't going to do that. So,
Right.
so that if we could point them to the Third Coast or the Texas State Action Team, because anybody can join those, for some
Exactly.
reason.
That's a
Yeah.
great idea.
So maybe we can talk a little bit more about that offline.
Sure.
I did want to also mention, I think it was Haley or somebody talked about the En-ROADS event coming up.
Yeah.
The Texas Climate Caucus in the State House is interested in us helping them put on an En-ROADS innovation talk, sometime after the session's over, maybe the second half of the year here or something.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
so maybe we can, learn something from the one that's going to go and say, how can we tailor that for legislative staff or something like that?
So some information I can share about that. So on this call, we had John Glover. I'm not sure if he's still on. I don't see him. John is one of our ambassadors, along with Christian Newell, is a En-ROADS ambassador here in the Houston area. And so previously we have provided in our local lobby meetings, we've included slides on En-ROADS, not a full-blown presentation, but within 5 to 10 minutes, we included some slides and talked about it in some of our local lobby meetings. So we have done that already, and it's something that probably other folks might be interested in.
So just for my own personal benefit, is there a place I can find a link to that event so that I can make sure I put it on my calendar?
Oh, you're talking about the one coming up?
Yeah.
Maybe Haley can answer that. I don't know.
I was going to say, didn't you have are you talking about the En-ROADS to Action event?
Yes, the Action Party.
Yeah, so I think you even had it in your newsletter, Joe. But yes, I can find that. It's an Eventbrite link, so
Right,
it should be.
I think Larry had a different question though. His question was about after that event is over, we'd like to get a recording of the actual event that was taking place.
Oh, the recording.
Yep.
But I'd also
yes.
like to have the link to the event so that I can watch it while it's live.
Yes, so yeah, the Eventbrite link will get you registered, and that'll provide a Zoom link to the Action Party. And then as far as afterward, if you are signed up with the Climate Action Now app, you should also get notifications. I think there's emails that go out with like the recordings as well. So if you don't receive that, then once it's complete, I can definitely forward it to the Houston group. That way you guys have that accessible.
Larry, I'm going to put into the chat the web link that I had for my slide here.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
But yeah, I know it's getting a lot of buzz. Again, Climate Initiative or Climate Interactive, sorry, and CCL at the national level. Brett Cease, he had put it up in the national and regional event links. So I know it's being marketed by all sponsors of the event. So we are very excited.
Haley, could you explain more about how the party works and what's to be expected there?
Yep. So if you download the Climate Action Now app, again, you'll get into a little easier other than having to set up all the stuff. I don't know if everyone attended the little crash course training I had on the app a couple months back, but essentially the Action Party will just be a culmination of different groups coming in to learn about En-ROADS and then the actions that we can take away from it. So if you guys are familiar with En-ROADS, there's all the sliders that show if we reduce this, then this is what could happen as far as reaching drawdown. So the actions that they're attaching to this will be very much related to everything that you see within the En-ROADS site. So as far as interacting, the whole Action Party is just going to be basically like a webinar of just hearing from the experts in that field, explaining En-ROADS. And then I believe it's moderated by, what was his name? He's from CCL. But again, it's just a discussion. And so while we're listening in at the webinar, you're on your app and you're actioning all the different things that are tied to the campaign.
Yeah, that was
So
Dana Nucitelli.
thank you. Yeah.
He does a lot of presentations in trainings and so on.
Yep. So again, it's kind of like our call to action, that we have during these monthly calls, where it's like we go and we call our representatives, only it's at the click of a button. So you can send emails very quickly and easily, or you can call them in real time. But yeah, it all takes place while we're on this one big webinar.
Should be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, we've run past our time and I hate to keep people longer than the meeting last. I'm a project manager, so I have to be on schedule. So any other feedback before we end the meeting?
Okay, I'm just going to direct you to this YouTube Citizens Climate Lobby Featherfest community comments. If you say it just like that, it'll pop up. I put out a piece of adding machine tape and got about 12 yards of comments, and then turned it into a video and put Mozart behind it. It lasts about 5 minutes, and it's a variety of input that the community gave. Little kids wrote, people who knew about climate wrote. It's fun to listen to, and you can get it there.
Roseanne, did you have a web link you can put in the chat?
It's just a YouTube. So go to YouTube, Citizens Climate Lobby Featherfest community comments. I wish I had something as fancy as a web link.
All right. And with that, let's wrap it up so we don't hold up anybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope we'll have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, you too.
Bye now.